Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories from rangers in the Appalachian wilderness. So grab your popcorns, dim the lights, and get ready for a deep dive into the dark side of the forest. But before we begin, please consider subscribing. And don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start. I was 31 when it happened. I'd been a forest ranger in the Appalachian backcountry for almost 3 years. Most of my shifts were during the day, sun up to late afternoon. Trail checks, filling out reports, making sure people didn't wander too far from where they should be. Sometimes I'd help a lost hiker get back to their car, which was usually the highlight of my week because it meant talking to an actual person. That night started like any other late shift. I clocked in around 3 at Ridgeway Outpost, one of the smaller cabins about 15 miles from the main station. Cabin might be too generous a word. It was one room, wood stove in the corner, desk by the window, radio on the wall that only worked when it wanted to. The cot was basically a metal frame with a cushion pretending to be a mattress, but the part that always got me was the map wall. It was covered in pins. Red for campsites, blue for water sources, yellow for places where people had gone missing. There weren't many yellow pins, but even a few are too many when you're sitting alone out there. First 7 hours were dead quiet. Not one call, not a single hiker. Just me, scribbling temps in the log, making perimeter checks every hour. By 9, I made coffee and convinced myself I was almost done. Sat at the desk flipping through a maintenance log, counting the minutes. At 10:15, I heard it. A scraping sound outside. Not wind, not branches. Metal on gravel. Slow. Dragging. I froze. Held my breath. Listened. It wasn't an animal. Deer don't drag metal. Bears don't either. I killed the cabin light, grabbed my flashlight, and crept to the window. Swept the beam across the clearing. Nothing. The noise had stopped the second I moved. I waited a full minute, heart thudding so hard it made my ribs feel tight. Then I unlatched the door. The night air hit like a damp rag as I stepped out, boots crunching softly on gravel. The flashlight cut through the dark, catching bits of leaves, the curve of the path, nothing else. No movement, no sound. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe an old signpost falling, a chunk of metal fence shifting loose. Stuff happens out here. I was turning to go back inside when I saw him, a figure on the path, walking toward the cabin. He wasn't close enough for me to see his face yet, but his shape was wrong for a hiker. Broad shoulders, stiff posture, and he was wearing a long, heavy coat, which made zero sense. It was August. Still muggy even after sundown. First thought, lost hunter. Happens sometimes. Maybe injured, maybe disoriented. I raised my free hand and called out, trying to keep it calm and friendly. "Evening. You all right out here?" He didn't answer, just kept walking. Slow, heavy steps that crunched deep into the gravel like his boots were weighted. I angled the flashlight lower, toward his legs. And that's when I saw it. He was dragging something, a long-handled axe. The blade scraped the gravel every time his arm swung forward. My grip on the flashlight tightened until my knuckles burned. I kept my voice steady, somehow. "You hurt? Need medical?" Nothing. He stopped about 10 feet from me. I could see his face now, gaunt, pale, lips cracked like he'd been chewing glass. His jaw worked like he was chewing on nothing. His pupils looked too big, swallowing the whites of his eyes. He muttered something too low to catch. "What was that?" I asked. He looked straight at me then and said, clear as glass, "How long's it take?" Blinked. "How long what takes?" "To get seen." That hit me like a brick. He thought this was a medic station. Happens more than you'd think. People assume rangers are doctors or at least have a clinic tucked in a corner. Normally I'd laugh and explain, but something in his tone made my stomach go cold. There was no question in it, just this cold certainty, like he already knew the answer and was waiting to hear if I'd lie. I told him the truth. Closest medic's over an hour out. His face twitched into something that wasn't a smile. Then, without another word, he walked right past me toward the cabin. Every instinct I had screamed not to let him inside, but trying to stop him, that would have gone bad fast. He had the axe and I had nothing. My sidearm was in the desk because regulations said I didn't need it unless there was an active threat. Right then, I decided regulations could go to hell. I followed him in, every nerve on fire. He dropped the axe against the floorboards with a clang that made my teeth ache. Then he stood in the corner, breathing hard, hands flexing like he couldn't figure out what to do with them. I reached for the radio like it was oxygen. My voice cracked, calling it in. Possible hostile at Ridgeway Outpost, armed. Request immediate backup. The reply hit like a gut punch. Nearest unit's 2 counties over, 20 minutes, minimum, 20 minutes. When I hung up, he was staring at the wall, whispering something I couldn't catch. His fingers twitched around the axe handle. Then, out of nowhere, he roared. This raw, jagged sound that ripped through the cabin and started pacing, fast, back and forth, muttering words that didn't string together. I slid toward the door, heart pounding like a drum. The second his back turned, I slipped outside. There was a shed behind the cabin where we kept tools and storm supplies. Reinforced wood, heavy lock. I ran for it, praying he didn't hear the gravel crunch under my boots. Yanked the door open, and nearly screamed when another ranger appeared inside. Leah. Back early from a sweep, I grabbed her arm, shoved her in, and locked the door. We pressed against the far wall, barely breathing. Then came the first hit. The axe slammed into the door, so hard the whole shed shook. Another hit, harder. Wood splintered, the lock rattled like it was about to snap. Every strike sounded like it was peeling the world apart. We radioed again, voices breaking. Dispatch said, "Hold tight, we're coming." Easy for them to say. They weren't hearing the door scream under steel. Then the hits stopped. Silence. I thought maybe he'd left. Until the footsteps started on the roof. Slow, deliberate, boards creaking above us. Then the nails shrieked as he pried at the panels with the axe blade. Blue lights finally cut through the trees just as the first board popped loose. Voices shouting, boots pounding, chaos, yells, a struggle, someone screaming words I'll never forget. "Get it off me, get it off." It took 5 officers to pin him. When they dragged him past us, his eyes locked on mine, wide and shining like wet glass. He grinned, split lip, blood on his teeth, whispered something I couldn't make out. That was the last night I ever worked an evening shift. My shift at the ranger station had barely started when a call came in about an unregistered campsite. Out here, that's not unusual. Happens all the time. They roll in, pitch a tent wherever they want, and leave behind a buffet for raccoons. Normally, I drive out, give them a citation if they're still hanging around, and call it a day. So I didn't think twice. Wrote down the coordinates, grabbed my pack, and headed out. The first 10 miles were smooth pavement, easy going. The next 8 were gravel. After that, forget it. The road was just 2 muddy grooves crawling up a ridge like some animal trail that decided to play at being a road. The silence hit me somewhere around mile 15. Not the normal peaceful silence people talk about when they romanticize the woods. This was the kind that makes you feel like the whole forest is holding its breath. No distant chainsaws, no ATV engines whining through the trees, not even a bird, just stillness. Trees stacked on trees, packed so thick they could have gone on forever. When the GPS finally pinged the coordinates, I pulled over and killed the engine. The quiet got heavier. I adjusted my belt, swung the pack over my shoulder, and started hiking in, her old map folded in my chest pocket. Because I've been out here long enough to know better than to trust a satellite in the mountains. The hike wasn't long, maybe 20 minutes. The ground was soft and spongy, like it'd been holding water for weeks. Then the trail opened into what I thought was just another patch of woods, until I saw This heap of junk piled like someone had lost a fight with a moving truck. Furniture cracked and warped, tossed every which way. Broken drawers sticking out like jagged teeth, rust-bitten pots clanging when the wind shifted. A mattress slumped under a shredded tarp, blooming with mildew like some slow-motion disease. It didn't look like trash someone hauled out here over time. It looked dumped. Fast. I crouched down and brushed my fingers across one of the boards. It wasn't gray and soft, like stuff that's been rotting for years. It was solid, and the color still clung to it. This hadn't been out here long. Months, maybe less. I took a few pictures for the report, was about to turn back when something black caught my eye, half buried under a collapsed dresser, peeking out from wet leaves. I knelt and pulled it free. A camcorder, old, maybe early 2000s. The casing was cracked, the hinge bent, lens scraped down to metal. It felt heavier than it should have, like it had been sitting in the cold for too long. The tape compartment was still shut tight. Most people would have left it. I slipped it into my pack. Back at the station, I waited till everyone cleared out for lunch. Didn't feel like explaining why I was digging through some relic instead of doing paperwork. We still keep a few old monitors in storage for training reels, so I hunted one down and fed the tape in. The machine groaned like I'd asked it to run a marathon, but the screen blinked to life eventually. No date stamp, no intro, just trees, pines, swaying slow like they didn't care who was watching. The camera wandered, jerky, uneven, like whoever held it was walking without a plan. For a while, that's all it was. Forest and silence. Then the frame froze on a clearing I didn't recognize. The zoom started ratcheting forward in stiff little jerks, and with every click, something in my gut tightened. There was a woman in the middle of the clearing, tied to a chair. Her head snapped towards something off screen. The lens began to move again, circling her in a shaky orbit. Breath hissed against the mic, ragged, uneven, like whoever held the camera was trembling. She started speaking. Not screaming, just these broken phrases, half words strung together like beads on a wire, cut through with sobs, the kind of voice that sounds frayed, worn down from begging for too long. I froze. My hand hovered over the stop button, but I didn't press it. Then a hand slid into frame, holding a knife. What happened next, I still feel it in my teeth when I think about it. The camera didn't flinch. No cuts, no clever edits, just slow, deliberate movements and this sound. God, that sound, that sank straight into my skull like a nail. It didn't look staged. It looked inevitable. I killed the screen before the chair went still. For a long time, I didn't move. My breath sounded too loud, bouncing off the walls. Finally, I pulled the tape, dropped it in an evidence bag, and carried it to my supervisor. He lasted maybe 30 seconds before laughing. "Looks like some backwoods Blair Witch crap," he said, grinning like I'd shown him a meme. "Fake blood, bad acting. I've scraped the real thing off the highway, trust me. These kids had no idea what they were doing." Then he got annoyed, said the phones were stacked, told me to log the camcorder's discarded junk and quit wasting time. I told him I would. I didn't. That night, I sat in my truck behind the station with the windows rolled up, watching the tape again. Twice. I was hunting for the trick. A prop knife, bad lighting, some gap in the frame that screamed fake. I didn't find one. The walls behind the chair were corrugated tin, bolted to beams that looked like they'd been yanked out of a barn. Dirt floor, packed hard, tools hanging on nails, old, sharp things with wooden handles. The light was flat and natural, bleeding in through gaps in the siding like it came from outside. No staged floodlights, no set dressing. I started digging through every database I could reach. Missing persons, cold cases. I even posted on a few ranger boards, framing it like research on abandoned film projects. Nothing. Not a single hit, except for a name scratched into the camcorder's side. Blue Ridge Camera Club? I searched it, got 0 results. Not even a stray Facebook page. I should have stopped there. logged it, sealed it, moved on. But I kept thinking about the way her head jerked when that sound came, like she wasn't looking at the guy behind the camera. She was looking past him at something else. The next morning, I drove back to the site, took my time, step by step, hoping to find a shack, a shed, some sign of that room. 2 hours in, the GPS might as well have been lying to me. Every direction looked the same, trees leaning in, pressing closer. Then I found it. A tree, hollowed near the base, stuffed with rags that looked like they'd been torn from clothes. One scrap still had a button clinging to it. Denim, women's cut. I left it. When I got back to the station, the camcorder was gone. The monitor was still warm. 3 people have keys to that room. None of them admit to touching it. I was 29 when it happened. I'd been working as a forest ranger in the Appalachian backcountry for about 4 years, stationed in a section of the park most people wouldn't even know existed. This place was old. Older than the rusted road markers and the skeletal fire towers that were leaning into their own graves. Most days, the work was routine. Clear a trail after a storm, log wildlife sightings, swap out memory cards in the trail cameras. The outpost cabin I stayed in was a joke by modern standards. Rough-cut timber, a single cot, a desk that rocked every time I leaned on it, and a radio that belonged in a museum display labeled Communication 1940S. If you wanted a shower, you heated creek water on the wood stove and dumped it over yourself with a dented tin bucket. No signal, no neighbors, no noise except what nature gave you. Some people would call it peaceful, and it was. At least until that silence started feeling like it had weight. By late summer, the tourists vanish. No hikers singing bad campfire songs, no kids dragging marshmallow sticks through the mud. Just me, the wind, and the occasional set of bear prints down by the stream. That's when things started feeling wrong. Not all at once, just in small ways. The first time I noticed, I was sitting at my desk after dark, updating the wildlife logs. Lantern on the table, notebook open, radio humming in the background like it always did. Then the static shifted, sharp and sudden, the way it does when a storm crawls over the ridge. But there wasn't a storm. Then a voice cut through, then, warped by static, a man's voice, but hollow somehow. It said something like, "Stack those logs," or maybe, "Move the load." Hard to tell through the crackle. It sounded like job site chatter, logging crew stuff. Except there hasn't been a logging crew anywhere near this part of the park for decades. I remember grabbing the map, scanning the boundaries just to be sure. Closest active timber lease was 40 miles east, outside the park. I even called dispatch to check if anyone had a permit. They said no scheduled crews, nothing on file. Probably just interference, they said. Happens sometimes. I let it go, told myself it was nothing for a while. A few nights later, the voice came back. This time, no chatter, just one sentence, buried in the static like someone leaning too close to the mic. "Come outside." I froze. My cabin didn't have curtains, and with the lantern lit, the windows were just black mirrors reflecting me back at myself. I killed the light. Stood there in the dark, heart banging like it was trying to get out of my chest. I waited for footsteps on the porch. A knock. Something. But nothing came. Just the radio breathing like it had lungs. I didn't sleep much that night. Next day, I tried to logic my way out of it. Radio bleed from a trucker, kids messing with CB gear, my brain making patterns where there weren't any. Anything except what it sounded like. 2 days later, I was out on patrol, swapping out SD cards in the trail cameras. Checked the first few, deer, raccoons, the usual. Then I hit one that made my stomach flip. It was me, standing outside my cabin, staring dead at the lens like a mugshot. The timestamp said 2:14 a.m. That was impossible. At 2:14, I was in bed, staring at the ceiling and trying not to listen for voices. And a camera that took this? 6 miles from my cabin. I drove back fast. The kind of fast where gravel sprays like gunfire under your tires. When I got inside, I tore through the place. Windows, door frame, even the old padlock I almost never used. Nothing was broken. Nothing missing, except for one thing, the map on the wall. Someone had stuck a red thumbtack in it, right on a spot I'd never marked, way out where the old fire road snakes into the ridge, miles beyond my patrol zone. I stood there staring at it so long my legs went numb. I should have reported it. I didn't. Told myself it was a prank. Hunters, locals, some idiot with nothing better to do. But I couldn't stop thinking about that tack. Next morning, I packed light and headed down the fire road. If you've never walked one of those old roads, imagine a scar through the trees, choked with laurel and deadfall. It hadn't been maintained in decades. I followed it for 2 miles, then 3. Nothing but green walls and silence pressing in from all sides. Then I saw it, one of my trail cameras, smashed to pieces and nailed to a poplar tree like a trophy, and carved deep into the bark beneath it was my name. Not my initials, not something generic, my full name. I stared until the woods stopped sounding like woods. No birds, no wind, just the blood roaring in my ears. I turned around and made it back to the cabin in half the time. That night, I locked the door. First time I'd ever done that. It didn't matter. At 3:19 a.m., the radio came alive. Not static this time. Breathing. Slow. Steady. Too close. Then the voice. "You're late." I didn't move. Didn't even breathe. The voice kept talking, calm and low, like it was giving instructions. Orders meant for me. I couldn't make out the words, and maybe that was worse. When it stopped, I didn't hesitate. Boots on, pack on, sidearm in my hand. I didn't turn on a light, I just walked out into the dark. The trails didn't look like trails anymore. The woods felt bent, like the lines weren't where they used to be. I didn't care. I followed the dirt road to my truck, white-knuckled the wheel, and didn't look in the mirror until I hit pavement. When I finally called dispatch, what they told me made my stomach feel like it dropped out of my body. That frequency? No one had used it for weeks. I quit a month later. Still hike sometimes, but not there. I was 34 when this happened. I've worked as a forest ranger in the Appalachia. It started with a call about a hiker named Lila, 26 according to her sister. Smart, outdoorsy, not the type to wander off without a plan. The last thing anyone heard from her was a text she sent, a photo from an overlook, one of those sweeping ridge shots that look like a watercolor painting. After that, radio silence. We kicked off the search the next morning. Standard stuff, grids, dogs, thermal imaging. The woods were stripped bare by then, leaves down, air sharp enough to nip your nose, so visibility was decent. Normally, that makes these things easier. This time, nothing. No broken branches, no tracks, no lost water bottle. Even the dogs seemed spooked. They kept circling, whining like they didn't want to be there. By day 2, I was on edge. Couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. I got up early and decided to push in before the others clocked on. Yet not exactly protocol, but something about this case needled me. Her photo, for one. It didn't match any overlook I knew, and I know this range like the back of my hand. I stared at the shot for hours the night before, tracing the ridges behind her. Distinctive rock spurs, a slope that looked like an arm folded across a chest. Closest match I could think of was near Black Hollow. Black Hollow's trouble, a mess of deep cuts and old sinkholes. We keep that section closed after the first frost because you can step off solid ground and end up in a drop you can't climb out of. People disappear in there. I parked on a fire road and hiked in, alone. The morning was knife cold, but I moved fast. By noon, I'd worked up a sweat under my jacket. That's when I saw the first sign, a strip of blue fabric snagged on a briar. Same color as the jacket in her photo. My stomach did this slow flip. I marked the spot on GPS, keyed my radio, and got nothing. Just a thin hiss of static that didn't even sound like real interference. Then I noticed the quiet. Not the regular quiet you get deep in the woods. This was absolute. No wind, no birds, no dripping melt from the rocks. Just my breathing, too loud, like it didn't belong there. I told myself to stay calm, checked my compass, and froze. The needle was spinning like a bottle on a party floor. My GPS blinked, flashed, then went dead. Tried restarting, nothing. The fabric trail led down slope into this twisted thicket. The branches were tangled like ribs. Didn't look like anything had passed through there in years, but the ground said otherwise. Scuffed dirt, patches where the leaves had been mashed down. That's when I saw them. Footprints. Bare feet, small, toes splayed wide, pressed deep into the damp soil. I followed them. They wound between the trees, weaving like whoever made them wasn't in a hurry. Then they ended at something I swear wasn't there the day before. A cave. Just a slit in the limestone, black as a throat. My flashlight barely reached inside. I called out, my voice flat, like the rock was drinking it down. About 20 feet in, I found 2 boots. Women's hiking boots, lined up neatly against the wall. Laces undone, tongues pulled forward, like someone had calmly taken them off and walked in barefoot. Beyond that, nothing. No pack, no clothes, no Lila. My stomach dropped. Instinct said get out, and for once, I listened. I backed toward daylight, half expecting something to wrap around my leg. When I stepped out, the light looked wrong. Muted, heavy, like dusk, even though my watch said 2:17. And then I heard it, a voice, hoarse, low, calling my name. Not Ranger, not Hay, my name, drawn out like someone had been practicing. Everything in me locked up. Only 4 people knew where I was, and none of them were anywhere near Black Hollow. The voice came again, closer, threading through the trees like it knew the path better than I did. I unsnapped my sidearm and yelled, "Identify yourself!" My voice sounded too thin. Silence. Then movement. A pale shape sliding between the trunks, just at the edge of sight. I went after it. Couldn't help myself. Crashed through the underbrush, heart hammering so loud it felt like it was in my throat. Whoever or whatever it was, it moved fast. Too fast. Every now and then I caught a flicker. Bare feet slapping earth, long black hair whipping, skin white as chalk dust. The tracks led into a clearing and stopped dead. Nothing moved. Just the damp stink of leaves and stone. And then I saw it, Lila's backpack. Standing upright in the center of the clearing, like someone had placed it there with care. Inside was her phone. Dead, but whole. When I pressed the power button, the screen flickered on. One photo. Standing at the overlook that morning, I don't remember dropping the phone. I remember running, not toward the fire road, just away. My brain shut down everything but the command to move. Branches whipped my face, my lungs burned like fire, and the trees felt wrong, leaning in, crowding the path like they wanted to keep me. When I finally saw the station roof, I thought I might puke. My legs were shaking so hard I could barely climb the steps. I logged what I could, boots, pack, last known position, but I left out the voice, the photo. Who'd believe it? That night, locking up, I heard it again, low, drawn out, my name, floating through the pines like smoke. I barely slept. Next morning, I called in sick and drove home. Told myself someone else could close the case. Let them deal with the paperwork, the interviews, the sister who's still waiting for answers. But at 3:12 a.m., something woke me. A buzz on the nightstand. My phone, a new photo on the screen, the inside of my house, and in the corner, near the door, bare feet. My shift at the fire tower started at noon. I've been doing this ranger thing for a while, 6 years now, but this was my first season working out in the Appalachian backcountry. The tower sat 30 miles from the nearest paved road. Most rangers hate these assignments. Personally, I liked it. No campers asking where to find the waterfall they saw on Instagram. No empty beer cans scattered across trails. Just me, trees, and a job that doesn't involve human voices. The hike up was normal. Mud sucking at my boots, gullies that make you question your life choices, the usual. I counted the markers like always because for some reason that feels comforting. Mile 3, mile 4. Like little promises you're still going the right way. When the tower finally showed itself above the tree line, my legs were screaming, but something felt wrong. Not big wrong, just that itch in your brain that says, hey, something here doesn't match the picture. The door at the bottom was locked. That never happens. Towers aren't locked for scheduled shifts. There's no point, unless maintenance is inside, and even then they'd log it. I crouched, checked under the steps. Sure enough, the spare key was sitting right where it should be. The padlock was so cold it burned my fingers, like metal pulled out of a freezer. I told myself it was just the shade, but it didn't feel like shade. I shook it off and stepped inside. Everything looked normal at first glance. The desk with the topo maps laminated from decades of use, the binoculars on their worn leather strap, the two-way radio, that relic of the ADS, sitting like a brick on the desk. Field guides lined up like little soldiers on the shelf, but the air had this taste, that metallic tang you get when you bite your lip. Rusty water. Or blood, if you want to be dramatic. I told myself it was just the pipes, because of course it was the pipes. I went straight to the logbook, standard procedure, checked the last entry, make sure everything's squared away. The page was already open. No date, no initials, no weather notes, just one sentence. Scrawled, in jagged handwriting, do not go out after dark. That's it. I just stood there, reading it over and over. Like maybe my brain would eventually spit out an explanation. Some prank by a bored ranger? Someone trying to make campfire stories for the new guy? I waited for the laugh track that never came. Finally, I tore the page out and shoved it in my jacket pocket. Like that would somehow cancel its existence. The day crawled by. I did the usual, scanned the ridges for smoke, logged the coordinates, try not to let the silence make me twitchy. At 6 sharp, I radioed base. All clear. The sun started sliding behind the ridges, turning everything that weird, bruised purple you only see in mountains. And then, the silence hit different. It wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, like the air was pressing down on my skin. I was just about to heat up dinner when the radio crackled to life. A voice came through, calm, flat, male. Tower 4, confirm lights east of Sector 9. I turned towards Sector 9. Nothing but trees sinking into shadow. Negative, I said. No lights visible. Pause. A few beats of dead air. Then, copy, stay inside. Click, silence. That voice, I didn't recognize it, and after 6 years, you know everyone. It didn't sound like anyone from the district office either. But I didn't argue. Not then. I sat back down, kept my eyes on the east. After a few minutes, there it was. A pinprick of light, low in the trees. Too low to be a star. Flickering, like fire. Could have been campers. Could have been a signal fire. Either way, not good news. I grabbed the radio. Static. Tried again. Nothing. Protocol says if there's any chance of fire, you go check. Every fiber in me screamed not to, but protocol doesn't care about gut feelings. So I strapped on my sidearm, clipped the dead radio to my belt, grabbed my flashlight, and headed down the steps. The forest swallowed me fast. My beam carved out thin slices of ground, but everything else was just black. The deeper I went, the heavier the dark felt, like it was leaning on me. The trail should have been simple. Half a mile east to the ridge. but it kept bending in ways I didn't remember. Every marker looked the same tree, same angle, like someone had copy-pasted the woods. I checked my GPS. The screen spun like a drunk at a carnival, then froze. The light stayed ahead of me. Always the same distance. No matter how far I walked, it never got closer. Then I realized I hadn't heard a single insect in 10 minutes. No crickets, no frogs, not even wind. Just me breathing, too loud in my own ears. I turned around, or tried to. The trail was gone. I swung my flashlight in a slow arc. That's when I saw it. A piece of paper nailed to a tree. Bright white against the bark. I walked closer, and my stomach just dropped. It was the page from the logbook. Do not go out after dark. Same handwriting, same jagged strokes. I tried to make it make sense. Maybe I dropped it, maybe the wind, but the nails holding it were rusted, sunk deep, like it had been there for years. I shoved it in my pocket and picked up the pace. My boots hit ground that felt soft, almost spongy, like fresh soil. Then I saw the light again, only this time it wasn't ahead of me. It was above me, hanging 30 feet up in the trees, bright as a flare. Then, blink, it was gone. And when the dark slammed back, I saw something move where the light had been. Long, too long. Sliding through the branches without a sound. I ran, no thinking, just pure brain-off panic. I ran until the trees broke and the tower came into view, except it wasn't my tower. The stairs were there, but they didn't lead to a cabin. They ended in nothing. And at the top, something stood facing away. Its back bent at an angle that made my brain reject it outright. I didn't look twice. I bolted. Branches clawed my arms. My flashlight died somewhere along the way. I didn't stop until I saw the real tower, whole and solid, glowing faint in the moonlight like a promise. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and slid down to the floor, shaking. The radio hissed. Voice, not the one from before, slid through the static, low and close, like it was inside the room. You came back. I didn't sleep, just sat there, watching the windows until the sun finally rose. When it did, I left everything, the maps, the radio, the tower, unlocked. Didn't call it in, didn't sign the logbook. I hiked out fast, every hair on my body buzzing like static, feeling something pacing me just beyond the trees. My shift started before sunrise, out on one of the southern ridges near Pine Hollow. I'd been working as a forest ranger for about 5 years by then. Most days the work was predictable. Check the fire roads, log the weather, make sure hikers signed in at the trailheads, and occasionally track down some guy camping too far in the backcountry. That was about as exciting as it got. That morning felt like it would be just another day on the list. First thing on the schedule was a maintenance check on an old fire tower. It hadn't been staffed in years, but the Park Service still wanted photos every few months to make sure it wasn't collapsing in on itself. Getting to it wasn't easy. It's about a 2-mile hike through hardwood forest that feels tighter and darker than most of the ridge. I left before dawn, the kind of early where your body is moving but your brain's still catching up and the whole world feels stuck in new. But halfway up, something made me stop. There was a man standing deep in the trees. He wasn't on the trail. He wasn't moving either, just standing there, squared toward me like he was planted in the ground. At first I thought I imagined it because the fog was still hanging low, but no, he was there. Solid enough that I could see the outline of a wide-brimmed hat. Maybe a coat hanging straight down. I gave a little wave. Nothing. So I called out, just loud enough to carry, "You okay out there?" He didn't flinch. Didn't even tilt his head. Just stood there. Then, after a couple of beats, he turned and walked deeper into the woods. Here's the part that still gets me. He didn't make a sound. Not a crunch of leaves, not a twig snapping. It was like he absorbed the noise instead of making it. Everything else in the woods made noise. This guy didn't. I told myself what I always tell myself in those moments. People wander off trail all the time. Some of them want to be alone. Some are embarrassed because they're lost. Either way, they usually want you to leave them alone. So I pushed it to the back of my mind and kept hiking. When I reached the tower, it was still standing, but something was off. The padlock on the hatch was gone. That lock had been there for years. I took the photos, wrote a note on my clipboard, and tried not to overthink it. Things go missing. People forget to check stuff in. That's the job. But I couldn't shake that feeling in my gut like someone had been there recently. The walk back was quiet until I saw the prints, boot tracks, fresh enough that they still had crisp edges. They broke away from the trail and ran about 15 feet into the brush, then stopped. Just like that. No scuffs, no drag marks. The soil was soft from last week's rain. Soft enough that anyone walking would have left a clear trail. But past those 15 feet, it was like the ground had never been touched. I stared at that patch of earth for a long time, longer than I should have, trying to piece it together in my head. Nothing made sense. Tracks don't just end. They don't vanish. But these did. I didn't write that in my log. Honestly, it sounded insane, even to me. 2 nights later, I was in the bunk behind the station when a noise woke me up. Not the usual creaks or animal noises you get out here. This was deliberate, metal scraping against wood. Long and slow, like someone dragging something heavy. I grabbed my flashlight, shoved on my boots, and stepped outside. The air was dead still. I swept the light across the yard, and that's when I saw it. A ladder leaning against the side of the station all the way up to the roof. We don't leave ladders out, ever. They're all locked in the maintenance shed. I know because I'm the one who locked them. My grip tightened on the flashlight. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe for a second. The beam shook in my hand while I tried to process what I was seeing. That's when something at the edge of the light shifted. Something tall and thin, slipping back into the tree line. Moving slow. Too slow. Like it didn't care if I saw it. I took one step toward the ladder, then froze. It shifted, just slightly, like it had been in use. That was enough for me. I backed up, went inside, locked the door, and sat on the bunk with my rifle across my lap until daylight finally came. By morning, the ladder was gone. No prints in the dirt, no marks on the siding, nothing. The lock on the shed was still secure, like it hadn't been touched. The next week was the longest of my life. Every time I went outside, I felt that crawling awareness that I wasn't alone. Twice on patrol, I saw him again. Same wide-brimmed hat, same long coat. Always just far enough that I couldn't make out his face. Both times, I tried to close the distance. Both times, he turned and walked away. Never fast, never running. Just this steady, gliding pace until he melted into the timber. I started locking the station door in the middle of the day, ate with the radio on and the keys in my pocket, slept in my boots a couple of times. I couldn't shake the sense that if I let my guard down for even a minute, something was going to happen. Then came the footsteps. I was half asleep when I heard them on the porch. Slow, deliberate. 2 steps, stop. Another 2, stop. I killed the lights and moved to the side window, heart pounding so hard I could hear it. The porch was empty. Then the sound started again. Circling the building. Crunch, crunch. I stood there, barely breathing until the noise faded back into the woods. I should have left that night. I almost did. But I told myself it was an animal. A bear, maybe. That was easier to believe than the alternative. 2 nights later, just after midnight, something slammed onto the roof. A heavy thud right above my bunk. Not a branch. Too heavy. I grabbed the flashlight, shoved the door open, and swung the beam upward. And there he was, squatting on the edge of the roof, arms dangling between his knees, head tilted like he was studying me. The hat was gone, his face... God, I wish I could forget it. Pale and stretched, with features that didn't sit right, like someone had tried to assemble a human face from memory, and got the proportions wrong. Eyes too wide, mouth too straight, no expression. Just a blank stare, like he was trying to figure out what I was. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he slid backward over the peak and disappeared. I didn't wait to see where he went. I bolted for the truck, started it with shaking hands, and floored it down the service road without even closing the door. I didn't look back until I hit the highway. 2 days later, another ranger checked the fire tower. The hatch was open again, and there was a ladder leaning against the railing at the top. I quit that week, haven't gone near those mountains since. It started on a Tuesday, late October. I clocked in, skimmed the overnight log, boring as usual, and grabbed the truck keys. My route was the northern trails. Check 2 old fire towers for radio functionality and circle back before dark. Easy day, or so I thought. By 2 in the afternoon, I'd parked at the north trailhead and decided to walk the 3-mile loop on foot. It's nothing crazy, just enough to stretch your legs before heading to the towers. About 20 minutes in, I spotted something that made me slow down. One of the laminated trail markers nailed to a tree was missing, just gone. The nails were still there, sticking out like little silver teeth, but the sign itself was missing. Not dangling, not shredded like a bear took a swipe at it, just gone. At first I chalked it up to weather. Maybe wind tore it off, but then I remembered it hadn't been windy in weeks. And these signs don't just fall off on their own. Then I saw another missing marker, and another, 3 in a row. Now I've seen people mess with signs before. Teenagers trying to be funny, tourists thinking it's a souvenir. But 3 in a row on a stretch of trail almost nobody uses? That didn't sit right. A few minutes later, I came across something that really made me stop. Boot prints. They were sunk deep into the dirt near a dry creek bed and not in a normal walking pattern. Whoever made them had been pacing over and over, tight little circles like they were stuck in their own head or didn't know where to go. No food wrappers, no water bottles, no gear, just that spiral of footprints like someone came out here to do nothing but walk in circles. I crouched down, took a photo for the log, and noted the tread pattern. Then I stood up and kept going, but that prickly feeling on the back of my neck wouldn't quit. The woods were dead quiet, and normally that's calming. That day, it felt like the quiet was listening. By the time I got back to the truck, the sun was sliding down behind the ridge. I drove to the station, wrote everything up, and decided to crash in the bunk room behind the office instead of heading home. That wasn't unusual. I do that sometimes if I had an early shift. I was half asleep on the cot when this thought smacked me in the brain. I never locked the truck. Normally, I wouldn't care. Out here, it's not like people are wandering around looking for something to steal. But in that moment, it didn't feel like nothing. So I dragged myself up, pulled on a jacket, and stepped outside. The night air hit me hard, sharp and cold, the kind that makes your teeth ache if you breathe too deep. The porch light cast this small circle of yellow, but beyond that, just pure black. The truck was about 50 yards away near the gate, sitting in that blackness. And that's when I saw him, a man, standing by the truck, not moving, not leaning on it, just standing there, facing me. Every muscle in my body froze. My brain was trying to make excuses. Hunter, lost hiker, maybe someone broke down on the road and wandered in. But no, he wasn't dressed like a hunter. No orange vest, no rifle slung over his shoulder. Just a jacket, jeans, and heavy boots caked with mud. We stared at each other. At least, I stared. He didn't move. Then his head tilted a little, like he was trying to figure out what he was looking at. Slow as hell, he turned and walked into the trees. And I swear to you, he didn't make a sound. No twigs snapping, no leaves crunching, just gone. That broke me out of my freeze. I bolted back inside, slammed the door, and fumbled the lock so bad the keys hit the floor twice. Grabbed the radio and called it in. My voice cracked like I was a rookie on day one. Dispatcher said deputies were on their way, but it would take almost an hour. Stay inside, stay calm. Easier said than done. For the next 30 minutes, the station was dead silent except for my heartbeat thumping in my ears. And then, on the porch, slow, heavy steps. Boards creaking under each one. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just sat there, clutching the radio like a lifeline. Then, 3 knocks on the door. Not pounding, not even firm, just these soft taps. Like he didn't want anyone but me to hear. I didn't answer. The steps faded after that. Then, silence. 40 minutes later, deputies rolled up. Lights flashing, dogs sniffing. The man was long gone. They found tracks in the frost leading away from the porch into the woods. Big prints. Same tread pattern I saw on the trail earlier. And here's the part that still makes my stomach drop. Next day, I went out to check the truck. In the bed, tucked neatly against the tailgate, was one of the missing trail markers. That's when I knew this wasn't random. Whoever he was, he wanted me to know. He'd been out there the whole time, moving through those woods while I walked my routes like a fool, thinking I was alone. I called my supervisor, filed the report, and somehow finished the week, because I didn't want to look scared. But Friday came, and I packed up everything I owned and drove out of those mountains without a glance in the rear view. 2 weeks later, I quit, and I haven't set foot on those trails since. My name's Corin. My shift started at dawn, like it always does. In the Appalachian backcountry, the call came in early. Missing hiker, male, mid-30s, been gone 2 days. Nothing unusual. People wander off trails all the time. Usually they're cold, tired, and embarrassed by the time we find them. This one felt different, though. No cell pings, no credit card activity since he vanished. That's rare. Even lost hikers usually leave a trail of digital breadcrumbs. By the time I reached the pull-off where his car was parked, the fog had burned off and the sun was creeping over the ridges. His car was a rental. Clean, empty. No backpack, no boots, no note on the dash. I walked slow circles around it, scanning the ground, but the lot was packed gravel. No tracks. I logged the plate, called it in, then clipped my radio back to my vest and started down the nearest trail. About a mile in, I saw footprints. At first, I thought they were boots, but when I crouched down for a closer look, my stomach flipped. Barefoot. Deep impressions, wide, heavy, right where the trail dipped into mud. The report said the guy was wearing boots. So why the hell were these prints bare? I traced one with my glove. Fresh, a day old at most. I told myself maybe he ditched his shoes. People do dumb things when they panic, but something about the pattern made my skin crawl. They weren't straight. They curved, doubled back, looped like whoever made them couldn't decide which way to go, or didn't care. I followed them anyway, left the main trail and pushed into the trees. The forest closed in fast. My boots sank into moss. Branches snagged at my jacket. The prints wove through game paths, ducked under low limbs, squeezed between boulders. Whoever it was didn't make it easy. After an hour, I stopped. My throat was dry, my shirt sticking to my back. I took a sip from my canteen and checked the GPS. That's when I saw it. The first cairn. A waist-high stack of stones, too neat to be an accident. Flat rock on top, like a capstone. The kind of thing people build for trail markers or for fun. I didn't think much of it until I saw the next one, and the next. They were spaced out, almost evenly, like someone measured the distance. And they weren't random. They formed a line, pointing deeper into a part of the forest that isn't on any trail map. I keyed the radio. Base, this is Ranger 12, found some markers. Might be static, just a hiss. I moved uphill, tried again, nothing. That happens out here, sure. But standing between those silent stacks of rock in a dead forest, my gut tightened. No wind, no birds, not even bugs, just trees, still as stone, like they were holding their breath. I kept walking, slower this time. The cairns led me to a clearing I swear wasn't supposed to exist. perfect circle about 30 feet across, and in the center, half in shadow, was a cabin. It shouldn't have been there. No road, no trail, nothing on the maps. The boards were gray and splintered, but the roof looked solid. Someone had kept it standing. The door was cracked open. I called out, "Park service." My voice didn't carry far. No answer. I unholstered my sidearm and nudged the door open. The hinge groaned like something alive. Inside, the air was stale. Not musty, just empty. No chairs, no bed. Just a table in the center. And on it, a notebook. Wide open, like whoever was writing had to leave in a hurry. I stepped closer. My boots thudded on warped floorboards. The pages were full of names, hundreds of them, all written in neat, patient handwriting. Each name had a date. The first one was from 1964. The list went on and on, decades worth. The last name stopped me cold. The missing hiker. Yesterday's date. The floor creaked under me as I backed toward the door, brain spinning for any kind of explanation. That's when I heard it. Footsteps outside. Slow, heavy, circling. Every muscle in my body locked up. My radio hissed again, static, then dead. I forced my voice out. "Park service, identify yourself." It cracked in the middle. The steps didn't stop. They multiplied. 2 sets, 3, 4, crunching leaves in steady, deliberate rhythm, closing in from all sides. I moved to the window, hoping for a look, but the glass was blacked out, thick with pitch or soot. Couldn't see out, couldn't see them. The doorframe rattled as I bolted, out the door, into the trees. My boots pounded the earth, and the steps behind me broke into a run. Not crashing through the brush like animals, not frantic, just controlled, keeping pace. I didn't look back. My GPS blinked, froze, then went dark. Compass spun like it was laughing at me. I aimed downhill, praying for water. My chest burned. My pack snagged on a branch. I tore it free, lost half my gear. Didn't care. The forest stretched on like a loop. Every ridge looked the same. At one point, I swear I saw another cairn just for a second before it disappeared behind me. I don't know how long I ran before I heard the stream. Followed it until the trees broke open onto a logging road. My knees gave out when I hit gravel. I just lay there, gasping, until a hauler came by and picked me up. Back at the station, my radio lit up like nothing happened. Dispatch asking if I'd located the hiker. I told them the truth. I never saw him. I was 32 when it happened. By then, I'd been a ranger in the Blue Ridge for almost 10 years. 10 years of walking the same trails, checking permits, clearing storm-felled trees, shooing off the occasional camper who thought the rules didn't apply to them. I mean, I'd seen just about everything. Hikers who swore their GPS was broken while standing next to a trail marker, hunters who thought no hunting signs were suggestions, cabins that raccoons turned into their own private resorts. I thought I knew these woods better than my own living room. I was wrong. That night wasn't even supposed to be mine. A buddy of mine, Harris, called in sick. Bad stomach, he said. I remember rolling my eyes because Harris always had bad stomach days when it was his turn for night patrol. But I said, fine, I'll cover. It's not like I had plans. By the time I locked up the station and hit the road, it was past midnight. When I checked the clock before turning off the main highway, it was creeping up on 1 in the morning. Most people hate night patrol. Too quiet, too lonely. Me? I never minded. There's something about the woods after dark. It's like the forest speaks a different language. Crickets buzzing, owls hooting, wind sliding through the trees, a steady kind of music. But that night, nothing, not even the bugs. Like the forest had swallowed its own voice. I remember frowning at that, telling myself it was just the season changing, maybe a cold front moving in, but the truth is, it felt off. like stepping into a room and knowing someone had just been arguing in it. Anyway, dispatch gave me one job: grab some contraband left behind at cabin 3. Real casual about it, just someone left a case of booze up there, go pick it up. Against the rules, sure, but not exactly a federal offense. The drive out was slow. The road was barely hanging on to the idea of being a road. Gravel, deep ruts, potholes like sinkholes. I had to crawl the truck along just to keep from losing a tire. Nobody uses that track anymore. The last time I'd been to cabin 3, I think I was still breaking in my first uniform. When the cabin finally came into view, my stomach sank. It looked worse than I remembered. Roof lines sagging like an old horse, porch rails snapped clean through, boards curled and split like rotten fingernails. The paint, or what was left of it, was gray and peeling, like the whole building had been leached of color. If it didn't have the number stenciled on the post, I'd have sworn it was some forgotten hunting shack. I pulled up and killed the engine. The crunch of gravel under my boots felt too loud in the silence, and it was silent, completely. No wind, no insects, no distant rustle of animals in the brush, just the tick-tick of the engine cooling behind me. I grabbed my flashlight, keyed the mic on my radio. Unit 6 to base at cabin 3, beginning retrieval. Static. Not unusual this far out, the valleys kill the signal fast. But for some reason, it grated on me, like I wanted to hear another human voice right then. Just a little confirmation that I wasn't alone out here. I headed up the steps. The boards groaned under me like they were protesting. I knocked just out of habit. The door didn't push back. It drifted open on its own, slow and easy, like it had been waiting for me. Hinges screeching in a voice I hadn't heard in years. The smell hit me next. Not rot, not mildew, just stale. Air that's been trapped too long. The kind of smell that makes your tongue feel coated after one breath. I swept the flashlight inside. Bare walls, shadows peeling off them like old paint. No bunks, no stove, nothing. Except for one thing, the table. Dead center of the room, like someone dragged it there on purpose. And sitting on that table, a single bottle of wine. Cheap stuff. Plastic cap, looked like it had been bought at a gas station. I let out a short laugh under my breath, mostly to break the tension clawing at my back. Logged it in my notebook, one bottle, one table, empty structure, nothing unusual. Except for the feeling crawling over my skin. I reached for the bottle, and something flickered in the corner of my eye, through the doorway behind me, out in the trees. A light, faint, small. Just a pinprick against the black. My first thought was another cabin, a lantern maybe, but there were no other cabins out here. Cabin 3 sat at the end of a dead-end track. Beyond those trees, nothing but miles and miles of wilderness. I stepped out onto the porch for a better look. The glow wasn't fixed, it was moving, slow, swaying, like someone walking with it. I gripped the porch rail, trying to work it out. Nobody should be this deep in the forest at this hour, and if they were, they wouldn't be coming from that direction. There's no trail that way, nothing but 40 miles of unbroken woods. I raised the radio again. Unit 6 to base. I've got an unknown light source east of cabin 3. Can anyone confirm hikers in this sector? Static. When I looked up again, the light was closer, not a little closer. A lot. It bobbed between the trees. Too smooth for fire, too jittery for a lamp. My hand tightened on the flashlight. That's when I heard it. Behind me, inside the cabin, a creak. Not random wood popping, a footstep. I froze. Breath locked in my chest. Another creak. Slow, heavy. I turned, flashlight cutting a white blade through the doorway, and it just stopped. The light. Like the walls swallowed it, black on black, no edges, no depth. My throat was dry when I called out. Park Service, identify yourself. Nothing. Then a third creak. That broke me. I ran. I launched off the porch so hard the steps nearly ripped loose. Out of the corner of my eye, that light in the trees jerked violently. Like whoever held it just started running too. I didn't look back. I slammed into the truck door so hard it bounced against the hinge stop. Threw myself inside, twisted the key, floored it. Gravel sprayed like gunfire as the truck fish-tailed down the ruts. Branches clawing the sides like hands trying to pull me back. I didn't slow down until the station lights hit the windshield like a flare. When I stumbled inside, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold a pen. Tried to write the incident report anyway. When I gave them the cabin number, the room just stopped. One of the older rangers, a guy named McKee, stared at me like I'd said something in another language. Then he said, flat as stone, Cabin 3 burned down in '74. There's nothing out there. Hasn't been for 50 years. I didn't argue, didn't go back to check. My shift at the ranger station started before sunrise. The logbook was damp when I signed it, pages curling at the corners. The pen scratched and dragged like it was protesting. I ran through the checklist: radio charged, spare batteries packed, first aid kit stocked, GPS loaded. Same as every day. Meanwhile, Harris was perched on the edge of the desk, nursing his usual metal coffee mug. That thing never left his hand, and no matter how much he swore it was black coffee in there, you could always smell the whiskey clinging to the rim. Got another one for you, he said, flipping a folded map toward me like it was a parking ticket. A red circle stood out like a bruise. Second abandoned camp this week, near Iron Hollow. You're closest. I frowned at the map, tracing the fire roads with a gloved finger. What do you mean, abandoned? Like no one there or no one left? Same as last time, Harris said, yawning like he hadn't slept in a week. Tent still up, gear scattered around, no campers, probably weekenders who spooked themselves and bailed in the night. Probably. It was always probably with Harris. Probably weather, probably panic, probably bears, even when there weren't tracks. I didn't bother arguing, but something about this one tugged at me. Missing people aren't rare out here, sure. The mountains swallow folks sometimes, but leaving gear behind, full packs, stoves, food still sealed, that's not how people work. You'd rather drag 50 pounds of junk down the mountain than ditch it and freeze. I zipped my parka to my chin, slung my pack and stepped outside. The cold hit like a punch. The station squatted on the ridge behind me, windows blank, chimney coughing thin smoke into the gray sky. Everything else looked dead and white, the trees locked in glass. The first mile was autopilot, boots biting into crusted snow, breath puffing in sharp bursts. My world shrank to the crunch underfoot and the rhythm of my steps. I followed the fire road until it funneled into a narrow track and started to climb. Fresh orange blazes on the bark led the way, bright against all that white. 3 hours later, I reached the first site. The tent sat half swallowed by snow, like it was sinking, a green dome barely holding its shape. I pulled back the flap and stared at 2 sleeping bags zipped up tight, side by side like they were waiting for someone to slide in. A stove perched on a flat rock nearby, canister still attached, food packets stacked neat, unopened. I looked around, turning slow. No footprints but mine. People leave tents sometimes. They collapse or a storm pushes someone to bail fast. But the sleeping bags, the stove, the food, nobody leaves those behind. Nobody sane, anyway. I snapped photos for the report, bagged a few things as evidence, marked the coordinates on my GPS. Then I checked Harris's map and saw the second red circle a few miles out. That's when things started feeling off. The trail narrowed into something that didn't look official, almost missed a fork. 2 faint paths cutting in opposite directions. The left had fresh orange blazes, neat and bright. The right had 2 deep slashes carved into a tree, parallel and close, like someone angry had made their own marks. I keyed my radio. Station, this is Ray. At a split past Iron Hollow, got markings off the map. Copy? Static hissed back at me. I waited, tried again. Nothing. Checked the screen, signal bars flickering like they were drowning. Perfect, I muttered. Fine, stick with the blazes, left fork. But the deeper I went, the worse it felt. The trail dipped into a hollow where the trees pressed close together, their branches tangled so tight they turned the sky into a gray net. The air felt wrong, not colder, heavier, like it was pushing against my ears. That's when I saw it. A flash of blue through the trees. A tarp. I figured it was like the first sight. Another abandoned setup, same story, gear, no people. I crossed the hollow slow, boots crunching too loud in the dead quiet, until I was 10 feet away. The tarp sagged between two trunks, snow sliding off the top in little sheets. Something solid bulged under it. Not a pack. Pack's slouch. This was shaped. Hello? My voice cracked, like I hadn't spoken in hours. It sounded tiny in the space between the trees. No answer. I pulled my gloves tight and pinched the tarp's edge. One tug and it peeled back with a sound like wet paper tearing. At first, my brain didn't want to file what I was looking at. A man. Skin bleached pale like the snow around him. Clothes stiff, edges rimmed in frost. His lips cracked black, teeth peeking through. Eyes open and cloudy, like marbles gone milky. In his hand, frozen tight, was a drill. Old-school corded kind, the metal casing pitted and dark. For a good 3 seconds, maybe 4, I just stared. My heart slammed so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Then he moved, not a twitch you imagine out of panic. His chest hitched, slow, dragging air through a throat that shouldn't work anymore. And his eyes, they shifted, just enough to catch mine. I launched backwards so hard I smacked into a tree, radio in my hand, fumbling like a drunk. Station? Emergency, Harris! Dead air. Not even static this time. Just silence, thick as cement. The tarp rustled. He sat up. That's when my body took over. No thought, just motion. I ran. Branches clawed my arms. Snow filled my boots. Didn't care. Behind me the sound started, a crunch of snow, slow, deliberate. I hit the fork and froze like an idiot. Both trails looked the same. No blazes now, no marks, just trees, standing too close, like they'd moved while I was gone. Pick one, run. My lungs tore, my legs screamed. The forest didn't open up, it just tightened, like it wanted me in. Every turn spat me into another hollow, another tangle of trunks. Then I saw them, 3 tarps, blue like the first one, strung up between trees like laundry lines, each sagging over something that could only be human. I don't even remember deciding. My body just bolted uphill, scrambling over rocks slick with ice, tearing my palms open on stone. Everything shrank to white breath, black trees, and the thought of my heart punching holes in my skull. When the ranger station roof finally broke through the tree line, I almost sobbed, smoke curling from the chimney like a rope thrown down a well. I slammed the door behind me, threw every lock, every bolt, then sat with my back against the wall. Backup didn't show for 6 hours. When Harris and 2 deputies finally came, I was still sitting there, staring at the door. They searched for 3 days, dogs, drones, the whole 9 yards. They didn't find a single tarp. No body, no footprints, but mine. I turned in my badge the next week.